Welcome to ThinkTech.com. This is Life in the Law. I'm Maryann Sasaki, and I'm here today with Jay Fidell.
She made me do it.
I made him do it.
She made me do it.
There's so many things I'm interested in and so many things I want him to answer, and I thought, who better than to advise young lawyers, the legal community in general. I have so many questions about why lawyers are perceived the way they're perceived in society, how the legal community in Hawaii is different, so we can just launch down one of those paths. And maybe we should talk about when you first came and how this, like, how did you come and why did you come?
I had just finished law school, and I was starting an LLM at NYU Law School in taxation, which is the best part of NYU.
It's the best taxation program in the country.
Yeah. And I was, I just started taking classes. In those days, when you were in law school, you were a 2S. And that means you were exempt from military service. There was a draft.
The Vietnam War, yes.
But once you got your law degree and went on to a master's program, and that was the tax program, was a master's program, the 2S went away.
You were no longer deferred.
Unless you were married. Oh. If you were married, that would carry your 2S on into graduate school. But I wasn't. So as soon as I started classes in September of 1965, there was mail for me from the draft board, and they wanted me to go down and take a physical. I said, "Holy moly, this is not a good thing. My schooling, and I have to go in baggy pants to Vietnam and get shot."
Yes, it was not a good time.
I really didn't want to do that. So immediately, some things are clear, Maryann.
Yes.
It comes to you as a vision, as a message, things you got to do. It doesn't happen often, but when it happens, you got to respect it.
So you got the message?
And a voice came to me and said, "Get your baggy pants down to the Battery in Manhattan and find a recruiting office." It was like, fighting fire with fire,
right.
A backfire.
Right.
And I went down and I scanned all the recruiting offices at the Battery, and finally I walked into the Coast Guard, and guy's name was Artie Johnson.
Oh, that's interesting. It's a
Isn't that
comedian's
amazing?
name. Yeah.
You know how many? That's 51 years ago. And he said, "Funny thing, we just got a directive from Washington telling us we had to recruit a dozen direct commission lawyers right out of law school."
How fortuitous.
Who don't have to go to, OCS or anything. They just wear bars. They come in and they're immediately commissioned, directly commissioned as officers in the Coast Guard. Wow.
Yeah, wow.
I said, "I'm on for that." I said, "What do I do now?" He says, "Come back tomorrow and I will have a panel of senior officers going to interview you." And they did. And it was really interesting. And to put the sign of the times on it, these guys didn't know how to interview. Sorry. If you'd been there, it would have been better.
Well, maybe.
And they said in the middle of the interview, they said, "How do you feel about birth control?" And I said to myself, is that legal? Can they ask me that? And, in any event, what in the world does that have to do with my application to be a direct commission lawyer in the Coast Guard? And I said, "Well, I like birth control. This is good. Like castor oil, mother's milk. It's a good thing."
Was that post Griswold? What year was Griswold?
I don't know.
Okay. Griswold is a seminal
1965.
Supreme Court case. Probably. Yes, probably.
So, I managed to get past that question. And then they closed the interview. And as they closed, they said, there were three of them. They were all senior officers, like captains. And they said at the end, they said, "Mr. Fidell, do you have any questions of us?" I said, "Yes, now that you ask. I'm wondering what you fellas think about birth control."
Good for you. I can't imagine why they'd be interested.
But they really liked that.
I'm sure they did. I'm sure they did. I'm sure they thought it was really clever.
So on day 3, they called me up from Washington, and they said, this was all during wartime, right? Everybody was ramping up all over. Mm-hmm. They called me from Washington. Peter Getman was his name. He was a lieutenant commander from Washington. And he said, you're on. You got it. You're going to be a direct commission lawyer in the Coast Guard, and we need to know where you want to go. And I said, what are my choices? He says, well, you can go to St. Louis. Okay. You can go to, I think it was Cleveland. Okay. Or you can go to Honolulu. I said, stop.
Yeah, really? Wow. That's what a great story. How that was really luck, right?
It's really happened. And then I had to stop at Fort was it Mason in San Francisco for like 3 days to get shots. Because in those days, for the military to come out to Honolulu, you get shots.
Right.
And you couldn't come out without going through the shots. So I had to spend like 3 days getting shots.
Like quarantine with your shots. Yeah.
Because it was like overseas territory.
Right.
Anyway, so I went through this kind of abbreviated familiarization and learned how to salute. And I came out here, and the first thing I did is I went to the district office, which is then 1347 Kapiolani, and I went to the bathroom. I had to go.
Okay.
And I looked at the guy next to me at the next stall, and he was an admiral. I had never seen an admiral before. I was totally bowled over. His name was Fabic, Admiral Ted Fabic, and I'm here, and he's there. We're both doing our business. And I didn't know what to do. What do you say? What do you do?
Do you salute in that kind
So
of
I
situation?
turned to him at the urinal, and I said, good afternoon, Admiral Fabic.
Well, that can't be wrong, right?
And this is completely inappropriate. You never, in the Coast Guard Naval Service, you don't salute indoors.
Really? Oh, I
You
didn't
never
know that.
salute
Well, that's
indoors?
good. A little piece of etiquette,
That's
good piece of
okay.
etiquette to know.
But he had a fabulous sense of humor, and he, at the urinal to my right, turned to me, and he saluted. He said, good afternoon, Lieutenant.
That is so funny.
I was a lieutenant. I
You
think
came in as a lieutenant.
I
wow.
came in
What
as
a great deal.
Yeah, I came in as a second lieutenant. I became a first lieutenant in 6 months. That
Right.
was the deal. Anyway, this was memorable because it sort of told me a lot about the Coast Guard, that they had a sense of humor,
Right.
that they were tolerant and understanding and benign. And
They were the cool
Yeah.
part of the armed forces, right? They're a cool branch, right? I think that's right.
Yeah,
You
they're
know.
very, very cool. And at the time, in wartime, they were treated as, in peacetime, they were Treasury. In wartime, they were part of the Department of the Navy. And I don't know if they were actually designated as such, but they were close to the Navy. They still are, I suppose, Naval Service. But the first thing that happened when I sat down with my boss, who was a great guy, is he said, you have to do some, well, the first thing he said is, very first thing, he said, you have to go to Japan. I'm ordering you, he said, you have to go to Japan tomorrow, right now. You have to familiarize yourself with Japan. I said, why? He says, because you'll never understand Hawaii until you go to Japan.
Wow.
He was right.
Yeah. Is that
He was
still
right.
true, do you think?
Maybe.
I know when
Maybe,
my husband
maybe
was growing
not.
up here, it was.
And that is a conversation about Johnny Apple, which I hope you let me tell you.
Okay.
Okay. So anyway, I went to Japan. I came back, and he said, you have to do some court martials. You have to develop that skill, that courtroom skill. He said, I'm sending you to the Navy. So he sent me to the 14th Naval District at Pearl Harbor, where I had the most awful, gruesome group of clientele.
Oh, I'm sure.
And I had to defend them. There was about a dozen of them. And I still have a picture of my Fidell's, group, my crew of all these defendants who got involved in all this stuff.
Did you serve them well? I mean, were you successful?
Well, it was all, in those days, it was kind of wired.
Yeah.
In other words, you made deals. You made deals with the prosecution. You hedged your bet. It wasn't like this was a Perry Mason trial.
Right.
They went AWOL. They were found with drugs, marijuana. Now it wouldn't be much of a deal. Or little red pills. That was popular.
Yeah, that was popular.
Yeah. So anyway, that's how I began my career in the Coast Guard.
And so, are you one of those lawyers that has a love affair with the law? Who, finds it, constantly surprising and ever enticing, or did you never have that kind of relationship with the law? I mean, I do. I find the law to be
I know you do.
fascinating.
It's wonderful that you do.
I do. And I know people that that are 60, 70, 80 years old that, it's unknowable. It's this huge body of, law, obviously unknowable, difficult to master. And so, but did you ever feel that way? I mean, why did you study law?
No, I'm more cynical than that. I don't think it works a lot of the time.
Well, let's talk about that, because I have a theory. You want to hear my theory? My theory is, this is my theory on why people hate lawyers. So if you go to a lawyer because you're having a dispute with somebody, that's a mistake. You don't want to go to a lawyer in that case.
Well, you don't have a dispute.
Well, you don't want to have a dispute, but you don't want to go to a lawyer. You want to go to mediation, maybe arbitration, but you don't want to have a protracted legal case, because you'll end up hating your lawyer because it will cost a fortune, and he'll seem to be doing nothing because it'll drag on for years. And it's just not the best way to solve those problems. But if you want to get something done, like you want a piece of legislation done, you want a contract done, you want to produce something, not destroy something, call a lawyer. And I think that if we did that more, people would like us more, because I think they don't like us because of the things we do in the courtroom and the ways we act in the courtroom, I don't know, maybe that's just a little theory I developed.
We represented a downtown office building, and we were writing their leases. Mm-hmm. And so we would get our word processor out. They didn't have word processors then.
Very fancy.
We got our word processor out, and we'd take the form of the lease and fill in the blanks, and maybe write some paragraphs that were appropriate for this tenant,
right.
This space, and we'd sell that to the client, and the client would pay our time for that. One day, my client, who was a great guy and everything, he called me and said, can you send me the computer file that you use in making our leases?
But that's always dangerous, to put that in the hands of a client.
It was a sign of the times.
Yeah.
It was a departure point, a tipping point. It reflected a tipping point in the whole profession, as far as I'm concerned.
That's right.
Because all of a sudden, we didn't have control over the document. They were going to control the document, and they were going to make mistakes. But you know what? They figured out the odds. And they decided that it was going to cost them less, and that once they had a document, there was a problem, they would work it out. Because they understood that, you avoid disputes, you avoid going to court, you avoid getting in the legal system. You make the lease because you have to have a lease.
Right.
But, if you can avoid having a lawyer draft the lease, that's better for you. And I think if you look now, most of these big buildings, they have, MBAs who are happy to write a lease, and they have the forms, and they will get the forms one way or the other, and lawyers don't do that much of it anymore, do they? That whole area of practice has changed.
Okay, yes.
And I think, it's telltale. It's the canary in the coal mine. It means that a lot of areas of practice have changed. Lawyers, in this town and probably in every city in the country, spend their time on different kinds of things now than they used to spend their time back.
Absolutely.
I'm not kidding, 50 years ago.
Right.
It's
Absolutely.
different.
We're going to take a quick break, and we're here on thinktech.com, Life in the Law with Jay Fidell. We'll be right back.
Aloha, my name is Jeff James, and I'd like to invite you to watch my show, The Military in Hawaii. It'll be shown every Friday at 11 a.m. here on thinktech.com. Aloha.
Aloha, my name is Justina Spiritu, and I'm the co-host of Hawaii Farmers Series. This is my co-host, Matthew Johnson, and you can catch us every Thursday at 4 p.m. at thinktechhawaii.com. What do we talk about, Matt?
So on Hawaii Farmers Series, we're going to be bringing on the farmers and also supporter of farmers, including restaurants, caterers, as well as government supporters and nonprofits, to hear their background stories and understanding our local ag community just a little bit better.
Yeah, essentially there's a lot more that goes into farming and the local food community beyond just producing the food. And we want to feature and get the background story on all these folks and see how we all work together as a community. So join us every Thursday. Aloha.
Jay assures me during the break that our clients are perfectly capable of drafting their own leases, and that but I'll tell you, my clients, don't draft your own lease, send me the lease. Tell me, trust
that's
me.
better for the lawyer.
It's not
better
about
for
the
both
money.
parties.
It's better for
But
both
it
parties.
reflects a sort of a new view
Right.
of lawyers by clients,
Well,
and
lawyers-
including by corporate clients. And corporate clients are people who are afraid to make a mistake,
Right.
but they size it up and decide it's okay.
But corporate clients, I mean, there are lots of things can't do. I mean, certainly in the securities areas
Oh,
and
sure.
things like that. I mean, there's a sophisticated, I wouldn't, but I'll tell you what I think is interesting. When I got out of law school, I probably was one of the last classes that was taught to write a contract not on a computer, so just sort of from scratch, I mean, we took provisions from various contracts, but it wasn't like fill in the blanks, And I think, lawyers that are coming out of school today, they wouldn't even know how to start to draft their own contract. If they didn't have a form in front of them to fill out, I think they'd be.
It's true.
At
It was golden to have forms, and I remember it. I've been in two firms. One is the firm before our firm that gave birth to our firm, and then our firm. And the golden asset was the forms.
Right.
And I was, detailed in both cases to build a form file. This is before you had it all on computer.
I've been
And a
detailed
form
for
file
that.
was literally a lot of old legal documents in a folder,
Right.
organized so that if you needed one, you got one. And without that, what are you going to do? You're going to sit there and write a 50-page lease? Give me a break.
No,
Never.
no.
You have to have a form.
Right, right.
And it becomes a whole billing issue too, which, I remember a short story. A guy represented the buyer of a golf course. Now, this was big money back in the 80s, I guess. And, millions were going to pass hands, a lot of land, a lot of issues. And he spent, a lot of time, one of my buddies, a lot of time writing this big deal, purchase agreement for,
Right.
for the golf course. And it worked, and they closed. A week later, another client came around, and he said, I want to buy a golf course. Can you help me buy a golf course? The fellow said, absolutely, yes. We can help you buy a golf course. Okay, and I'll draft an agreement for you. And he drafted an agreement based on the one he had just finished,
Right.
which was pretty much the same agreement, right?
Right.
And he charged the second guy what he had charged the first guy, even though he put in no time, virtually no time at all.
But I think that's equitable. He put the
Well,
time in for the
equitable,
client.
but it's an interesting phenomenon of the way things work. He charged him, and I said, how you bill by the hour? How could you do that? Well, I decided that it was worth that. And I suppose, a lot of lawyers would say, what are you going to bill him for $1.50 for this very valuable document? It has
Right.
intrinsic value.
Right.
But if the client knew, honestly, if the client knew that he was billing him value on the basis of another agreement, he might not be so happy
No,
about
he
it.
wouldn't be happy, I
Yeah,
don't think.
yeah,
I mean,
you're-
I don't think you could even do that because the clients know now that, these are documents, you have them in electronic form, and you couldn't really bill for we used to spend days drafting contracts.
Well, Some clients come in and say, I want to buy a golf course, And my buddy Sam bought a golf course last week, and he gave me a copy of his agreement. Here's a copy of his agreement. Use the same agreement.
But that's a
and
problem.
Bill me by the hour.
Yes, well, I have a client like that, actually. It was a leasing agreement, but a food truck leasing agreement. And he thought, well, there's some forms on the internet, this can't be so hard. But he started it, and this is the worst kind of situation for a lawyer, is when a client starts the contract and you have to then go in and fix the contract, it's a nightmare. I mean, it costs more for the client that way than if the client had just called you up and said, look, this is what I want to do, can you do it?
Well, you have to say no. You say, thank you, but this isn't going to work.
Right.
It's going to cost more time for me to rewrite what you did than if I started on my own form. And the client should understand that. But
Right.
you have to tell them early before you
Right.
start wallowing in it.
Right.
And I know lawyers, this is on the same point. I know lawyers who, you send them the golf course contract, and it's fully written, and they say, we're not going to do the deal on your contract, Jay. We are throwing the whole thing out because we have our golf course form, and we're going to use that. If you don't like it, go down the street. We're not doing the deal.
Really?
And I've had cases like that where the other guy says, not yours, mine. And
That's-
then it's a nose-to-nose, face
Right.
down.
Oh, you mean the other lawyer
The other
said?
lawyer.
Yes, people
We
are
don't
very
use
attached
your
to their
form.
forms.
We aren't going to spend
know.
time reviewing and changing your form.
Right.
You got to review and change our form.
Right.
And I
Yes.
hate that because it's an attitudinal thing. That's the win-lose model.
Yes.
You know, no face, no respect. It's macho thing.
Well, you know, the thing is, if you can't use somebody else's form, you kind of have no business being a lawyer, because you really are obligated to understand every provision of any contract that comes before you. And you know, if you just feel comfortable with your own and you don't really feel comfortable with other people's, that's like almost, I wouldn't say malpractice, but it's poor practice. I would say it's
Well,
definitely poor
It's not going
practice.
to make you any friends.
Yeah.
On the other hand, you know, I can imagine, and I've seen situations where you send your form, it's a very good form, nice, you got a good place, and you fixed it nice and made it look good and all that stuff. And you send it to the other guy, and he's okay with it, but he goes to his client, corporation.
Right.
You know, somewhere in lower Manhattan.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, near where I signed up for the Coast Guard.
The
maybe.
very epicenter of corporate America.
Yeah, and they say, well, sorry, we never do anything on anyone else's form. You're going to have to explain to Fidell that his form doesn't mean anything. We're going to use our form.
Right.
And what are you going to do? Then it becomes a bargaining power issue.
Right.
And you can either have the deal or not.
Right.
But you can't have your form.
Right, right. I hope young lawyers, this is what we think about. You know, I mean, when we're in law school, nobody tells you this, but these are the kinds of things we think about when we're lawyers. It's not quite as boring as, I mean, we're talking about forms for 5 minutes, and but it's really important.
Further to that, what is a form anyway? A form is a lot of legal language, some of which has been tested in court, and a lot of which has been crafted. And when I say crafted, I mean somebody looked around the corner on those words. Somebody tried to figure out differential fact patterns that could win or lose on those words, how those words would test out
Right.
if it got into court. And does this surprise you when I say there's a lot of tricks in that language?
Well, no, you need to know that language, but you need to know why, yeah. No, yeah, that it's, well, so when you were a young lawyer, so you had no connections here, right? Or you just came here and you decided...
I was in the service.
You were in the
when I came.
service, and then you got out of the service.
I got out of the service, and I went back to New York to finish my master's
Oh, I
in
was wondering what
taxation.
happened to your master's. I was wondering if they
Yeah.
let you
So
finish
I
it.
spent 3 years here. That was my obligated period of service. And then I said to them, you know, I know you need people to help defend the country, so I'll go back to New York, finish my degree, and all you have to do is pay my tuition and move me back to New York. And they did. So the United States Coast Guard paid for my tax degree. Tax was not really part of their mission.
Right.
But they wanted to keep me in for a while.
Why did you study tax? I mean, I applied to the NYU tax program. I like tax. It's very mentally challenging, and it's a way of redistributing wealth. Am I saying it right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think you have to make a comparison between law schools then and law schools now, and you have to distinguish NYU, which was a special kind of law school. Law schools then, at least as far as I was concerned, were business. They were all about business. There was not a lot of, defense of the environment.
No, there was nothing.
There was
Even
not
when
a
I
lot
went
of
to law
defense
school.
of the labor,
No.
of the working
No.
person. It was about business. Here's how you
Right.
do. Here's how you go down to Wall Street,
Right.
and help a Wall Street firm or a Wall Street company.
That was the paradigm.
that was-
that was a golden prize to get a job at a big Wall Street law firm, big white shoe shop.
I remember NYU was associated. Well, part of NYU was the GBA, the Graduate Business School, which was on Wall Street, which gave master's degrees and PhDs in business, and that was the golden touch to have a degree like that. So what I'm saying is that if you went to NYU in those days, in the early 60s, it was all about Wall Street, it was all about business, and that includes tax. So you finish 3 years, and you have come to believe that, the the golden ring is tax.
Well,
And-
I did actually. I wish I had taken it. I regret not taking the course still, and it's 20 years later. But it is the kind of the golden ring because, you know, at the top of the heap of corporate lawyers, the tax man is the one who knows something that all the other lawyers don't know.
Right, isn't that so?
It's totally true.
You know, it's specialization, and this is one area that is very specialized.
Yes.
Thing about tax is, you know, if you go in there as a novice and you have to give an opinion, take a position in court, whatever it is, on the interpretation of a tax statute, it's so easy to be 180 off.
Really?
180 off.
Oh, okay.
You'd better know what you're talking about.
Right. It's so arcane and so convoluted, the tax code, and
It's not
it's not
intuitive
easy.
at all.
No, not at all. So, what would you say to people that are contemplating and going to law school now? Do you think it's a bad choice because of what's happening with, you know, computers and people doing their own documents? And do you think it's not a good choice for a career?
For tax?
Oh, for anything.
Well, you know, people come and they say, you know, should I send my kid to law school? And I think you better think twice about that. I mean, there are other things that may be more gratifying in life. You know, law school is hard, but they've always said, they said it to you, they said it to me, law school, you know, improves your chance of success in business.
Right.
Law school teaches you about the human condition.
It teaches you how to think, yeah.
And to appreciate, you know, how people conduct themselves in engaging with others. I mean, it covers human conduct.
Right.
And you asked me before, you know, whether I was infatuated with the law. I'm infatuated with the fact that it is the way we deal with each other.
Right.
It keeps our society, our civilization together.
Absolutely.
And we don't have the law, we don't have lawyers, oh boy, that's a problem. So that's what I like and appreciate, and I'm standing in awe of that all my life.
It's so, it seems so delicate, right? It seems like such a delicate, a fine line. How does this work? It's everybody has to buy into the mystery, the majesty of the courts. You need buy-in, and when you don't have buy-in, you have anarchy. I guess it's the dissolution of civilization, right? So
It's the social glue.
Right.
It's the social compact.
Yet people
the
hate
basic
lawyers.
agreement that holds us together.
So we're holding society together.
We have a great
we're the
obligation.
guardians of holding. We
And
do have a great
when lawyers
obligation.
do not respect that obligation, when they become less than fully moral about it, that's very dangerous for society in general.
Sure. Yeah, I think people don't realize that we're officers of the court, that we have certain moral obligations, certain ethical obligations, and that some of the things that maybe make you annoyed at your lawyer are things that they have no control over. They just can't do. They can't do that deal the way you want to do it. They can't make that argument the way you want to make it, or talk to these people. So, you know, I can't even imagine sidestepping the ethical component is so big to me.
This may surprise you, Maryann, but
I'm such a naive.
people do.
How do they do it? But
Sidestep the ethical obligation.
but it's such an integral part of. Then you're not a lawyer. It's such an integral part of practice that if you're not doing it, you're not being a lawyer. You're doing something. You're being a business guy,
It's
maybe.
your client comes to you with a really fishy deal. He wants you to participate in lies. He wants you to do something that's immoral or bad for the community, bad for the common good, that will have a detrimental effect on the parties and the community.
Well, that's
So
that's
what
a
do you
question.
say to him?
Well, it depends. You know, it depends. I mean, I think that you can't make the judgment that this is going to have a detrimental effect on the community. Like, let's say, I represent developers, right? And so theoretically, I'm so liberal. I'm very liberal. I shouldn't want to represent developers because
You'll get over it.
they destroy neighborhoods. But the thing is, the developer is entitled to legal counsel, as are cigarette companies and lots. I mean, my personal idea of right or wrong doesn't really often come into my decision with respect to the client. I won't do something illegal. I won't do something that I think is
There's a line
immoral.
there,
Right.
There's a line.
But they can do things that really are not beneficial to the
You
community.
have to see that line. And I said, on one side of it, you're not going to do it. No, sorry, go down the street. I forget the exact circumstance, but there was, this offshore investment kind of
Oh,
thing.
like in the Caymans?
Yeah, it's sort of a fraud thing, and it was one of those investigative reporters was trying to do this, and they went through a number of lawyers in Lower Manhattan and asked them to engage in this patently illegal deal, and a number of them said yes, they would, and they would. It was fraud. But they said yes, they would. A lot of them were like on the edge. Well, we'll have to see about that, but they didn't say no. And one guy, a solo lawyer in an law office, in Wall Street, he said, "I'm not going to do that. I'm not touching that with a 10-foot pole. You guys are going to break the law. Out."
Well, good for that. Well, the thing is, in a large law firm, there is a tremendous amount of peer pressure too. So I could see why a solo practitioner would be more inclined to take a stand, even though it might be his bread and butter. But I'm going to take a break.
Is it something I said?
No, no. We'll continue talking during the break. This is Maryann Sasaki. It's Life in the Law. You're on thinktechhawaii.com. Just stay tuned.
Hi, I'm Ethan Allen. I'm the host of Likeable Science on Think Tech Hawaii. We talk about why people should like science, why science is actually fun, how science is a dynamic and vital part of everyone's life, why everyone, every man, woman, and child on the planet should really know science, should love science, should be familiar with science. So it's a great show. People come on here and have interesting conversations with us. They tell us why they do what they do, why they love it, why we should love it too. I hope you'll join us every Friday, 1 to 2 p.m. And of course, you can see it anytime on YouTube. Aloha.
Aloha, I'm Kirsten Baumgart-Turner, and I'm fortunate to be able to host Sustainable Hawaii at thinktechhawaii.com. I hope you'll join in with us every Tuesday from 12 noon to 1 p.m. to see the interesting people we have to share with you their information. Aloha.
The question is, what did Johnny Apple know? Jay, what did Johnny Apple know? Tell me.
My family has been associated with the New York Times for a long time. And they sent me, they put me together with Johnny Apple on a trip that he made. Johnny Apple was the, quote, chief correspondent of the New York Times. What a job, huh? And he had complete, power to go anywhere in the world, talk to anybody, write about any subject. Little tiny business card, a sort of mini business card, and all it said was Johnny Apple, chief correspondent, New York Times. Now there's a business card, yeah, doing his job. Amazing man. He looked like Burl Ives, great big guy, knew how to live.
Yeah, he wrote about food, I think, sometimes too. Didn't he write about? I think I remember.
About everything.
Yeah.
And he was really a great journalist. So I met him on the lawn of the Kahala Hilton, then the Kahala Hilton Hotel, and we sat and schmoozed. And I didn't realize that he had a pen and pad there, a reporter's pad, and he was writing it all down, about what I was saying. At the end of the conversation, he said, your high school classmates will be calling you. I said, what do you mean?
What did you say?
I'll tell you that in a minute. Your high school classmates will be calling you. And I said, why? It's because I'm going to write you up in the New York Times. I'm going to put your name. I'm going to have a feature story about what you told me. And they're all going to read it. And they're going to call you. So, come on. Well, they did.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure they did.
My high school classmates called me. And I thought, wow. Johnny knew he was right. The story itself, which was memorable, was he said, and this would be in the 80s, maybe, yeah.
Yeah,
He died since.
Yeah.
He was living too well, I think. But the story, what he asked me about, and actually he asked me for anything, and I gave him this, and he just glommed onto it. That's a good reporter, just looking for angles.
Right.
Life and the practice had changed between the time I arrived here in 1965 and the time we were meeting, which was probably 20, 25 years later. And, he was really curious as to the melting pot racially, among the bar. We were just a territory a few years back.
Right.
Now, all of a sudden, we were saddled with trying to find a way with all this American precedent trying to look like we knew what we were doing collectively
Right.
as a bar, trying to find relationships of practicing lawyers, because it's different in different states, and
Oh, absolutely.
you know, it's different in different practice areas too.
Absolutely.
So I told him, you know, what I thought about that and how it had changed from the time I first arrived, where it was friendly on the one hand, but maybe not so friendly on the other hand. You know, a lot of lawyers, and we just did this 3D, you know, project for the Bar Association. They see the past back when they started practicing, the 50s or 60s, as you know, those were the glory days, because everybody was super friendly. You want an extension of time on your complaint? No problem. You're pleading,
Right,
no
right, right, right,
problem.
right.
You know, we're all in this together. Except that, you know, what happened was that little by little, lawyers came from the mainland who had no roots here.
And they despoiled the legal
And-
community.
And the local guys, you know, they weren't going to give them that extension so
Right,
quickly.
right.
And they weren't, you know, they were not part of the same community. And so little walls were built. And, you know, and there was one firm, I won't mention the name, who was famous for never giving extensions, never giving any you know, courtesy or comedy or anything
Right,
like that.
right.
Because they wanted to win.
Right.
And so, you know, the bar sort of changed from this kind of sleepy town thing where, hey, we're in this together and we all know each other and nobody loses face, and win, lose, or draw, we want to feel good at the end.
Right.
I really like that, by the
I
way.
like that
was
too.
really beautiful.
It's civilized.
Yeah, well, it got a little less civilized when, you know, the crowds came in, and then there was all this business coming in, and clientele from far away were imposing their demands for service on the local lawyers. And the local lawyers, you know, were doing, I want to win, I want the deal, I want it this way.
Right.
And the lawyers had to do that. And so they would go to the lawyer on the other side and say, this is the way it's got to be. And so it got a little tougher, yeah?
I laugh because from my experiences in New York, they're not, the lawyers here are not the tough in the same way. I mean, I've seen crazed lawyers, crazy partners. I mean, I think there's still a degree of civility here that doesn't exist. It doesn't exist at all in New York. I mean, there's just the abuse of power.
That's too bad.
Yeah, it makes it a really unpleasant thing to go in to do every day. Because, you know, actually the actual work is pleasant, but, you know, the unpleasant part you know, that's also key for people that are thinking about studying the law, or lawyers who are looking for jobs, or just even lawyers who are practicing. You have to like your partners, you have to like your associates, they have to have the same mindset as you. If you don't have that, then the law is it's no fun at all, because you spend your day thinking about that, you know, navigating around this difficult partner, or, you know.
But I think you're the synthesis of this, because, you know, you can appreciate what's going on. You know when someone is flim-flamming you.
Oh, yeah.
And you're going to be able to deal with that without losing your own style. And I mean, that's the sign of a guy or a woman who really knows how to practice at the right level. You know, I know you're trying to fool with me. I know you're cheating on me. I know you're pushing me around. I know you're not so nice, but I have the skills to deal with you.
Right.
And you're not going to make me angry.
I had that experience yesterday. It wasn't on the other side, but I had an encounter with another lawyer, a very snobby lawyer. And I make it a point not to be, because, you know, I come from very modest roots, and my roots inform my practice nearly as much as law school does. So I don't never try to make anyone feel smaller. I think it's a sign of a person of integrity is never to make anyone feel smaller than they are. So yeah, I had to laugh, because this guy was trying so hard. And, you know, people react to Harvard too. They hear Harvard, a bell goes off, and they're like, I'm going to get her. I'm going to show her, you know, how smart I am, or whatever. And yeah, he was like, you know, not nice. And I'm like, why are you wasting your time? It's like a water off a duck's back. I'm still going to be nice to you. I'm still going to be collegial, you know, and you're not going to get my goat. I mean, you can't, it's impossible. A lawyer once said to me, I love this. I thought this was so hilarious. You know, not only are you winning, Maryann, but I don't like you personally. And I said, really? I said, I must be really, really winning, you know, for you to have to come out and say that. And he said, yes, you are. And so, you know, I just don't, I don't know. I did that kind of thing.
Just trying to psych you.
Yeah, right.
That's
But
all
it
it is.
didn't even I was like, okay, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to, ruin your perfect record or something like that. Whatever was on his mind.
Listen,
something
people
was
see
on
the
his mind.
bar here as, when I say the bar, I mean the lawyers, especially the ones in adverse, controversy situations, as what they say they are. But in fact, when you get man to man, woman to woman with them, some people will make those remarks and try to psych you.
And that's not
and
possible.
it's not nice, and if the public knew it, they wouldn't think it was too civil.
Well, that's why they don't like lawyers, because lawyers have a tendency to let that slip out in their social lives, their sarcasm, their need to win, their aggression. And, I told you I didn't become a litigator because those are my worst qualities: my aggression, my need to win, my ambition. I didn't want to feed those qualities, but people let them out.
Well, you want to have a long, comfortable, enjoyable life.
I'd rather do good. I mean, I just reveling in winning and reveling in being the top dog. I don't know.
I'm sure a lot of this is fomented by the client himself or
Oh,
herself.
yeah, but you have
They
to
come to you and
manage
say,
your client.
Maryann, you've got to win. I want you to beat that guy up.
Yeah.
I want to see you do a slugfest with him. And, you got to manage that.
You
right?
have
You
to.
can't-
It's your
You can't say,
obligation.
okay, I'm going into the pit for you. I'm going to draw blood. No.
Right.
Say, sorry, I don't practice that way.
Right.
We're going to do this, fairly.
And more importantly, you don't want it that way. I mean, you don't want a knockdown, drag-out fight. That's how things get expensive and awful. I can tell you a different way. I can tell you a better way. And, we should do it this way. So, but I don't even think I could litigate now because those aggressive, those competitive feelings, I don't really even have them anymore.
Yeah.
And
But isn't it changing? I mean, as the community changes and you get, more transparency, you get people concerned about the community, the social structure, the environment.
Well, I think there are better lawyers.
Social-oriented
yeah,
things.
socially oriented lawyers are. I mean, they save the community in a sense. I mean, they're the ones who are doing the good work. The environmental lawyers, the poverty lawyers, I don't know.
They can also be very aggressive. I'm just thinking.
Oh,
to
they
myself,
certainly can.
There's a suit now about water in Kauai. I think I saw that in Civil Beat this morning. And A&B is, in this great controversy, and the environmental interests.
They want to win too. They want to win
They
just as
wanna
much as
win.
anybody else. So.
And, you can say, well, they're doing the right thing for the community, but they're
Using
trying to bash the other guys.
bad
What's
tactics,
happening?
poor
Yeah.
tactics.
Yeah.
Well, listen, thank you for joining me today. There's so much more I want to ask you. I'm just fascinated by your life, your practice. I wanted to talk about why you decided to develop thinktechhawaii.com. We don't have time
We
for
never
that
got
today.
to that.
Yeah, but thank you so much for joining me. This is Maryann Sasaki. You're on thinktechhawaii.com. Join us for Life in the Law between 1 and 2 on Wednesdays. Bye.